Hi everyone, Michael Britt here. Now, I'm very proud that the Psych Files podcast has been so successful. It passed the 20 million download mark. And a lot of that success is due to my episodes on how you can use proven memory strategies to remember just about anything, from memorizing terms for a test to remembering people's names at a party or a meeting, or even memorizing speeches. It's amazing how useful these strategies are. So, I've put all of these episodes into one audio course. The course is called Hippos, Aliens, and Llamas: Quickly Master the Tricks to a Great Memory. And it's available now on avid.fm/memorymaster. All one word. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 328 of the Psych Files, in which I have this question for you. Are you being true to yourself? Are you being authentic? And that's a question that has kind of bothered me for many, many years. I kept asking myself that question. In fact, when you get in psychology, you find that question comes up a lot about authenticity. So I found an interesting article in Scientific American I wanted to share with you on that topic. Okay, so this idea of authenticity. Are you being yourself? Now, yes, we hear about it a lot in psychology, but we also hear about it on the popular media. So, for example, if you saw the movie, and I'm quite a movie buff, so I see a lot of movies, and one of them that I saw was Rocket Man, which is kind of the, semi-fictional, autobiographical kind of movie. But here's a clip from the trailer in which this idea of whether or not you're being your true self is spoken.
So how does a fat boy from nowhere get to be a soul man?
You gotta kill the person you were born to be in order to become the person you want to be.
Now, that clip is actually a little bit odd because I'm usually, when I hear this idea spoken in movies, it's usually along the lines of that you have to give up the person you were brought up to be in order to be the person you're supposed to be. This particular quote kind of is odd, but it expresses the idea. Is there a person inside of you that you're not in touch with and that you haven't expressed? In psychology, one of the founders of the humanistic psychology movement is Carl Rogers, and he also expresses this importance of authenticity. And so just a brief clip from him here.
I really accept you fully just as you are. Listen not only to the words, but to the meaning, trying to understand the person that's hidden within each one of us. That's helpful. If I really care about this person in an unconditional way, that's helpful. If I can really be myself in the relationship, not a professional expert, not a, quote, psychologist, not a psychotherapist, just me in that relationship, that's helpful. All those things are possible, and when they come together, that creates a very powerful climate for change, for growth, for drawing out the potential of the client.
And here's one more place where you are being told to be yourself, and hopefully you have seen either the first movie of Aladdin back in the 90s, and even in the most recent movie. Aladdin is pretending to be a prince, even though he's not, to impress the princess, Jasmine. So he's clearly not being himself, and the genie is there to remind him of this.
A prince like you and every other stuffed shirt swaggering peacock I've met. Just go jump off a balcony.
What? Stop her! Stop her! Want me to sting her?
Buzz off.
Okay, fine. But remember, be yourself.
Now, if you're clearly not trying to be yourself, as Aladdin was, then it's obvious that you're being fake. But there is a theme in our society that I think is used to manipulate you, and that is that maybe there's a person inside you that you haven't actualized yet, to use humanistic terms. And that's where this article comes in. I found it in Scientific American, and it was written by Scott Barry Kaufman, and it's called Authenticity Under Fire. And I contacted Scott and asked him to be on the show. He's busy this summer, but he'll be on the show in the fall to talk about authenticity and other things. He's done a lot of research, and he also happens to be the host of another popular podcast called The Psychology Podcast. So if you're listening, you've got your podcast app going, check that one out. So what's great about the article is that he really, he talks a little bit about the research. Believe it or not, there is a lot of scientific research being done about this idea of authenticity. And Professor Kaufman brings out some things I think are really worth thinking about. One of his first quotes: "Which form of being true to yourself is the real authenticity? Was it the time you really gave that waiter a piece of your mind? Or was it the time you didn't tell the waiter how you really felt about their dismal performance because you value kindness and were true to your higher values?" Good question. When are you really being yourself? Okay, so that alone, I think, should make you think a little bit about, so how do you know when you're being, quote-unquote, your true self? And I remember thinking about this a lot because, obviously I've decided to, years ago, decided to become a psychology teacher, and now I'm doing a lot of online learning. And so there are times when I pause and think, is this what I was supposed to do? Am I being true to myself? Is there another person in there? Are there things that I didn't do that I was, quote-unquote, supposed to do? And then, I don't know about you, if you ask yourself that question, you do as you get older. If you're 18 years old, I don't know if you think about it. Yeah, you do. Anyway, I think back to like the earliest times. I asked myself, okay, so when you were, younger than 10, what were you into? And I asked myself younger than 10 because I figure before society and my parents had an influence on me, what was I like back then? And I think, well, I know I was into like robots and space. I mean, I liked science fiction. Okay, what does that mean? Should I have become an astronaut? It's a little bit late anyway right now. But is that how you get in touch with your true self, by trying to think back to your earliest times? Sounds like it ought to be. Here's another interesting point that Scott Barry Kaufman brings up in this article. Quote, "It seems that what people refer to as their true self really is just the aspects of themselves that make them feel the best about themselves. All around the world, people show an authenticity-positivity bias." Quote, in other words, people include their most positive and moral qualities, such as kind, giving, and honest, in their descriptions of their true self. People judge their positive behaviors as more authentic than their negative behaviors, even when both behaviors are consistent with their personal characteristics and desires. Unquote. So we think that we're being most truly ourselves when we can think of the good times, when we were being good people. Well, if that's true, then I'll bet you and I and millions of others all point to the same things. I remember the time I helped that little old lady across the street. I was really being, what I think is really truly me. Okay, that's also positive. And if you and I both refer to the same sorts of events, maybe not the specific event of helping a little old lady, maybe you helped a little kid across the street, but if we all do that, then how is what we think of as our authentic selves, how are they different? How is your authentic true self any different from my authentic true self? I think that's a really good question to ask. Okay, here's another great point by Scott Barry Kaufman. Quote, "People actually tend to feel most authentic when they are acting in socially desirable ways, not when they are going against the grain of cultural dictates. People tend to feel inauthentic when they are feeling socially isolated or feel as though they have fallen short of the standards of others. So they get this information, that's an unquote there, by surveys and open-ended questionnaires asking people, when did you feel the most authentic? And theoretically, all of these reports ought to be quite different. But it turns out that they're not that different, and we tend to feel inauthentic when we're doing things that are socially undesirable. And I think that's one of the keys to understanding this nagging sense that you're not being authentic. And that comes from the fact that in order for us to be a society, to operate with each other, we all have to give up doing what we would really like to do. That's why I think it's such a powerful concept. You think there's another person inside of you who hasn't been expressed. Well, guess what? We all do, because, as I say, we all have to take on roles. And so in sociology, they call this role expectation. If you're a student, then there are behaviors you can do and behaviors you really shouldn't do. If you're a teacher, same thing. If you're an audience member in a movie, you can't do whatever you want. You have to constrain your natural inclinations. You can't jump up and down. Well, you can, but you'd be considered odd if you did. If you go outside of the role of audience person. When you go shopping, you have to fit into that role. Now you're a shopper, and there's things you can, you got to stay on the right side of the lane. I mean, everybody has to do these things in order for us to succeed as a society. It's no wonder that it's kind of an archetype, if you want to call it that people think that there is some sort of stronger person inside of you that's aching to get out. And I think that's part of the success, or the appeal of these movies, the superhero movies. So 2 last really good final points, which is that if you think back to the times when you did something you shouldn't have done, when you broke a rule, one of society's many rules, quite often you say to yourself, well, that wasn't me. So what is you and what is not you may not be so much personal to you as it's just what's not you is what we've all been taught is undesirable behavior. Let me conclude with this quote. So as I said, I'll have Professor Kaufman back in a few months, but here's a quote which is interesting. So he'll go over this briefly, but also he tries to have a somewhat positive ending on this. And he says, quote, "I do believe there is within each of us our best selves, that is, aspects of who you are that are healthy, creative, and growth-oriented, and that make you feel most connected to yourself and others. I would argue that getting in touch with your best self and intentionally actualizing your most creative and growth-oriented potentialities is a much more worthy goal than spending your entire life trying to find the one true self. So if you're worried that you have not become your one true self, it's sort of like sitting around waiting to see if, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, waiting to discover your passion, which is another term that I think is used to make us feel, to manipulate us, really. But the moral of the whole passion thing is that you're not going to find it sitting around, that you need to just do a lot of different things until you find something that, you do well that makes you feel good about yourself. Do the things that you do well, do the things that you feel you have a talent for, and let the world come to you and give you its praise, and that's how you're going to feel the best about yourself. All right, well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Psych Files. Take care. One last thing, remember to check out my memory course. You can use these strategies to get better grades on your tests, to remember people's names, and even help you to remember those jokes you keep forgetting. So you will be amazed. avid.fm/memorymaster. That's avid, AVID.fm/memorymaster. Thanks.